I'm so looking forward to today's discussion with the Feminista Jones. I've had the privilege of knowing Feminista for close to 5 years, and I have always been impressed with her inspirational story, her ability to set boundaries, and the way in which she brings all of her lived and learned experiences to everything she does. She is a role model when we talk about living your most authentic life. Welcome to Small Steps, Big Change, the podcast where we meet extraordinary people who have used small steps to help create big change. I'm your host, Drew Sullivan. In August of 2020, after years of alcohol and cocaine use, I hit rock bottom. I knew at this moment that I had no choice but to get sober. Through lots of hard work and dedication, I made that a reality. I have to admit, I thought that this would fix everything and that a life filled with happiness would just follow. But sobriety was only the first step for me. I had to be sober before I was ever going to rebuild my life and recover all that was lost. I kept going, focusing on the next right move, or as I call it, the next small step. I then took the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. Every day is a journey for me, and I now believe that I'm in the middle of the most beautiful recovery story of all time. What I have learned is that my story has a lot in common with anyone looking to make big changes in their life. That's why it is time that we work together to make big things happen. Each week on this podcast, I will introduce you to a friend who has used small steps to help create their big change. We are all going through something, and it is my goal that by sharing our stories and bringing vulnerability and empathy to the forefront, we can learn from each other and take the small steps that are needed to create big change. Named one of the top 100 Black social influencers and 25 most inspiring women on Twitter, Jones is a feminist, thought leader, and social media influencer honored for online activism. Feminista Jones is a Philadelphia-based feminist writer, public speaker, community activist, and retired social worker. She's an award-winning writer and the author of the critically acclaimed Reclaiming Our Space: How Black Feminists Are Changing the World, From the Tweets to the Streets. Her work centers around queer identity, critical race theory, intersectionality, mental health, and social work. She also teaches a course on the African-American queer experience at Temple University. I'm so excited to be here today with you, Feminista. How are you and how are you doing?
I'm so good, Drew. This is so amazing. Thank you for having me here. I'm honored just to hear you say that. That's so awesome.
I've really enjoyed a number of the moments on this podcast to date, but one thing about all of them that I really enjoy is finding out a little bit more about childhood and upbringing and really how the development of the guests aligns with the work they've done and where I've met them in life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh gosh, what hasn't happened? It's interesting. I do talk about that in different spaces because I think it contextualizes what I go. So as a speaker, they want me to talk about domestic violence or substance abuse or homelessness or things like that. There's a lot that I can draw from my personal story to bring to the table. So I do that a bunch. But I think that the things that people may know about me, may not. I was born into poverty like many people are, but back in 1979, in New York City, if people can think about what New York was like in the 70s, it was like the wild, wild west, and people were really, really, really struggling in some really bad situations. And my parents weren't any different. The first few years of my life, I lived in housing projects. I experienced homelessness as a child and after my parents split and things like that. So that really was kind of the foundation of what my life would be like in some ways. The interesting thing is that the outcomes and the experiences that I had are not typical of people born into those situations, which is also something that I talk a lot about, right? So they call talented and gifted back in the day. They would tap kids and say that they're smart or whatever, because I could read at advanced levels and I could do math easily and, those kinds of things. And so I would get into trouble a lot in public school for talking too much. They would always say I was too opinionated or I talked too much. Had no self-control and all those things like that. My mother got tired of the school system trying to say that I was bad when really I was bored. And so she didn't have a whole lot of money, but She looked into schools and eventually was able to get me into a private middle school. And that really changed my life. I went to a private middle school in Manhattan, and that actually just completely changed the trajectory of my life. And I think about the sacrifices my mom made financially to be able to do that. From there, I went to boarding school, right? A private boarding school. And then from there, I went to the Ivy League. So again, those are not the outcomes that you expect of someone born into poverty in New York City in the late 70s, early 80s. None of that gets left behind, right? All of that is a part of who I am and what brought me to the time when people met Feminista Jones.
I think it is one of the most important qualities that we carry through life is who we are and where we came from. They are two of the most important qualities that we have as human beings. And I feel as if too many people try to avoid their past as they think it will handicap their future. I always say with my substance use abuse that I had to come fully to terms with the fact that my abuse exists and that it's never going to go anywhere, but that it is completely separate from my future. But I carry it with me every step of the way to make sure that I never forget where I came from, because that truly is who I am and a part of me. You consider yourself a retired social worker at this point in your career. I wonder, thinking that social work still plays a lot into the work you're currently doing and will do in the future, how much of that developed from your childhood? And do you think that because of your childhood, that's what led you down that path?
Well, yeah. So within the social work, I function as a counselor and a therapist, right? So you get into the space where you are providing healing and care for people. I was working in the housing and the homelessness sector, right? So most of my career as a social worker was about providing housing for people who had been chronically homeless or that were living with severe and persistent mental health, issues or psychiatric disabilities. And so you are every day functioning as a counselor, even when you are doing administrative things. And I went more towards the administrative track because I wanted to make change on a larger level, because I was just like, I don't know if we're helping people in the best way that they need to, having experienced this stuff myself. And I've been homeless twice, once as a child and once as an adult. I was like, I just don't think that we are giving people what they need, because the people making the decisions actually don't know what it's like to be without a house or without a place to live. So I wanted to do that. But if I'm director of a 50-unit apartment building that is providing housing to people, and I've got this office here, people are coming in every day to sit on my couch and talk, about things, and you're helping them, and people that are living with decades of substance addiction and things like that, spending the days working with people on treatments and all that kind of stuff. So that comes with it. So, it wasn't that I didn't do that. I definitely did. But I think in the latter part of my career, I really began to focus on things like policies and programming and legislation and things like that. How do we make things better so that we can do better work as social workers, as counselors, therapists, things like that?
Totally. I love that. I always thought that I didn't have a similar story in my career where I could pull experiences from my past and really say that they have impacted me in ways in which I carry them in the work I do. But recently I've felt as if I totally have those experiences that I carry with me when I'm working. And I definitely can understand a lot of the inequities and the marginalization that my clients go through, because I now have the trauma of substance that I've come full circle on. And so I can totally understand it from a substance use abuse and mental health perspective about how important this organic personal perspective can be in doing work.
Yeah. And the empathy that builds over time, having experienced these different things, right? So when I'm working with a survivor of domestic violence, I can relate to that. When I'm working with a survivor of sexual assault, I can relate to that. I have, those experiences. And that's not to say that you have to have those experiences to be a good support system for someone in that capacity. But there is something that draws you to that particular work because of your lived experiences. And then when you back that up with education and training and getting the support that you need to be able to be a good provider of care, just a little bit different than some of the others.
Yeah. And I mean, and hearing you talk, I hate to say this, I'm going to correct you. You're not a retired social worker.
You can't retire. So I always say that tongue in cheek. You can never retire from social work, right? Like it's one of those things like you're a doctor and you say you're retired, but you're on a plane, somebody gets sick, you help them, right? You're always kind of in that space where you're trying to improve society. When I say I'm retired, it's more from the day-to-day stuff. I'm not running a building. I'm not working on a policy project. I'm not going to an office and having meetings about different people that we're working with. I don't do any of that anymore. So I retired from that particular part of the life, but you're always somebody. I mean, if you're a good social worker, you're always somebody who cares about making the world a better place. And when you're asked to do certain things, you come in and you do it. And I like that being able to do that as a speaker and working with, social workers and practitioners now as like a trainer or facilitator or a speaker. I still kind of do the work, but not where I'm clocking in every day.
I totally hear you there when it comes to the fact that our tribe calls us at times of need and usually plays off the strengths that we have. I remember vividly as a child and even now as an adult, my mom, who's been a nurse for 40 years, you pretty much could have called her the neighborhood nurse. My parents recently moved out of their house after being there for 30 years. And I think we all miss the physical house, and I think our neighbors miss us and just being there. But I really believe that one of the largest voids is the caregiver and the healer that my mom is in the neighborhood, even, and just how she would always be available to help the families that we grew up around whenever there was anything going on medically in their lives. I think that there's times that we feel like we need a break and that our time is our time. But I never once heard my mom complain about being this person for so many. And I think it's because it's truly in her blood of what she loves to do. And she loves to help people. And I feel as if my mother was given that gift the same way in which you, through your learned perspective, were given a gift to be able to help so many. And in a way, it's just kind of gratitude that you can pay forward, but then also empathy that you have built inside you that no experience, no PhD, no education, none of that can even remotely prepare you in the same ways that learned perspective can.
I agree with you. And I think that, I mean, it happens still. People will come to me for those kinds of things and they think they're seeking advice. And I'm like, you're really seeking therapeutic support, which I'm fine giving. Like what I do, that's why I love doing it. It's funny, Drew, that you say this because like I've really been thinking about getting licensed now that I live in New Jersey, like getting licensed in New Jersey and possibly doing private therapy and stuff like that, because I just feel like there's a need for it. I mean, and there is a shortage of like Black queer therapists that are actually good. There's a shortage of them, right? And I'm like, well, I do have more time, on my hands these days. Why not? So you never will fully walk away from it. But me doing private, if I take 2 days out of the week where I meet with people, that's better than having to go every day working 70, 80-hour weeks. I was burned out from that part. And I was just like, I can't do it anymore. Over 15 years of it, so.
Totally. You now consider yourself an organizational change maker, which I believe has social work in the job description. With everything that you've been through over the past decade regarding social justice, which we will get into, to kind of close the conversation on social work, what do you think are some of the biggest problems right now when it comes to social justice for those that are working directly in social work?
Oh, that's good. Number one, people don't have money. I'm telling you, the majority of our problems would be solved if people had more money. And that's just the bottom line. We live in a country that has not raised wages. Wages have been stagnant for decades. They have not met the increased cost of living. And we are pushing people further and further and further into desperate spaces. When people are in desperate spaces, that's where crime comes in, right? That's where you get more of the robberies and more of the things like that because people don't have money and they need to be able to eat. They need to be able to take care of their families and keep shelter, and they're going to do whatever they need to do, right? We are human beings. It is our natural instinct to live. For most people, it's our natural instinct to live. So we're going to fight for that. And I think social workers really have to contend with there's only so much support you can offer without giving people money, you know? So that makes it difficult. So after that, I would say we're definitely facing a housing crisis coming from the housing sector. I tell people all the time, they don't, it's funny, people don't actually know what I am an expert in a lot of these things. And one of those is housing. And not just, oh, I give a homeless person a place to live. It's like, no, I understand housing policy. And we have a housing crisis right now that is being driven by ultra wealthy people who do not care about the common and average American. And so as social workers, folks are having to deal with where are people going to live? Because we know that when, especially those of us that take the housing first approach, we know that having a stable place to stay is the first step to a person getting the rest of their life together, whether they're trying to stop using drugs, whether they're trying to find work, go back to school, get their children back, whatever it is, a stable place to stay is the first step. And now people are being priced. I mean, they already were, but now it's to the point where the average American cannot afford, right? Not even a 2-bedroom apartment in this nation. That is an atrocity. Social work is going to have to contend with that and trying to get the funding to build more of these affordable units and things like that. That stuff is drying up. It's hard. And I would say another major thing is basically dealing with discrimination, right? So social workers have to contend with racism and sexism and ableism and, all these things in the work that they're doing, because that's just the world that we live in. And it's really hard to get support and help people when you're facing those forms of discrimination. If you're a case manager and your client is an elderly white woman and you take her down, she's going to be treated so much nicer than if it's an elderly Black man, for example. These are some things that we have to contend with. Domestic violence survivors are treated differently. Like the people that are currently using substances are treated differently. People with psychiatric disabilities. So we have to contend with a lot of the discrimination just in being able to get people the help that they need. And part of that, Drew, honestly, I'm going to say this, the main reason for that is because these so-called helpful organizations, these philanthropists, these folks, they want good numbers and they want positive numbers. And if you bring in people that have a higher risk of failure, that hurts their numbers. So they want to take the people that they know are almost a surefire bet that we help them get a job and help them do this and they can be a success story, and it makes us look better.
Wow.
So, yeah. And I saw that with my own eyes in nearly every place I've worked. And it disgusts me that that's still the approach that people are taking.
Totally. I hear you there. One of the speakers we actually represent, her name is Dr. Tiffany Manuel, and her work is centered around how leaders can powerfully and intentionally make the case for systems change. And one of her specific areas is housing. And I saw a tweet that she put up on social media that was highlighting the work that Mackenzie Scott was doing in homelessness and poverty. And it was really talking about how the housing that Mackenzie Scott has worked on has directly benefited people that are suffering with substance use abuse. And it made me think about the privilege that I have regarding my own personal situation and how I never even realized during my sobriety journey and now into recovery that my experience would be so incredibly different if I didn't have a home. The basic needs that we have as human beings, if they're not met, then there's really a whole new level of difficulty that comes into doing hard things. And I can only imagine if my consistency that I had in my life during the hardest times of removing substance, if that wasn't available to me, and if I wasn't able to come home to the same apartment with the same partner and dog and bed, and if I wasn't able to create structure that allowed me to get healthy, I can't even imagine how much more difficult it would be. And I can't even imagine how I would have been able to navigate the waters of removing substance from my life.
And you don't have a place to get the hours of sleep that you need every day. So your brain starts to deteriorate because you're not getting rest. Your body starts to deteriorate. So you can't even think about setting goals for yourself because you're not getting enough sleep. You start with that, right? You're living in perpetual fear especially if you're on the streets, that something's going to happen to you. Why wouldn't you use a substance that may alleviate that fear for you? Right. So you really got to think about it in that way. And I don't come from the medical model, right? I come from a place where I believe that anybody can achieve recovery and that we can change our behaviors and help people support changing behaviors and things like that. I won't call somebody who's 82 years old and hasn't had a drink since they were 45. I'm not going to call them an addict. You've recovered from that. You can move forward from that. But I believe that when we look at what people are missing is the social supports that they need to be able to redirect their energy towards other things. And if you don't have a place to live, you're often put in positions where you have to build community and socialize where you are just to be safe. And if those people are using and those people are doing XYZ, or you have to kind of do that as currency to remain part of the crowd that's going to protect you ultimately while you're out in the streets, what do you do? Right? I've always had to think of these things. These are things, again, when me being a director, right, overseeing, a social work team and all that stuff, I'm talking to my folks like, you all have to think about these different things. And I'm thinking about them because I have seen it, and I've seen what people are contending with and experience that desperate of, I will do anything to be able to eat today or have a place to sleep today kind of thing. So I bring that to the work in a way that maybe some other folks aren't able to, but I think it's important, just the real life experiences that we tend to not think about when we're theorizing over things like substance addiction or, homelessness and things like that.
Totally. So social work, social media, always been a large part of who you are. Your real presence on social media from the general, I'm not going to call them fans, but the people you influence now, or I guess the communities that you serve on social media, they started to follow you because of hashtags that you started, and you really started to change the way that people thought about activism. Can you tell us a little bit about that and just a little bit about that journey and just kind of how the social brand was built and how it kind of builds off of the social work you were doing, the activism, the organizing you were doing?
Yeah. So I've been doing this activism since I was like 19, probably earlier than that. Technically, like I got my start in high school, kind of protesting against really stupid things that they were doing. But I really, really cut my teeth in college and when I was 19, which is where a lot of activists get their start, right, on college campuses. And so this was 1998, 97, 98 or something like that. Yeah, we didn't have all this social media. We didn't have all of this stuff. We barely had email at that time. We barely had our listservs, right, where we could try to organize with these listservs and things like that. There was no Facebook, although I've been on Facebook since 2004. We didn't have this stuff. And so I was learning old school, printing flyers, calling people, talking to people on the streets, trying to rally and get people to sign petitions and things like that before we had the technology. So you're talking about somebody who already knew what it meant to organize in that way without having the technology to rely on. Also, organizing panels and discussions, community meetings, all these kinds of things way before that. So I'm coming into social media with that background. I'm already experienced in that. And I tell people all the time, social media is media. It's several medium. It's just like a telephone, just like letter writing. It's just another tool that we can use as a part of our activism. And that's why sometimes I get prickly when people say I'm a social media activist. I'm like, no, I'm an activist who uses social media. And I brought that energy to the space. And originally that was not my goal. It was not my goal to use social media for like social change or anything like that. I just wanted people to read the stuff that I was writing because I've been blogging since 2004. I was like, I just want y'all to read what I'm writing because I'm a writer. But then kind of realizing, wow, I'm watching people wanting to organize, wanting to do things. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if you guys are going about it the best way because again, I have this organizational leadership management kind of visionary thing. So I realized, wow, I could actually leverage this platform to not only do some organizing, but also to help others that are trying to get into this space to kind of model how we can use social media for these things. And so that's how I kind of slid into that. But I just kind of got into I don't like social media anymore. I don't. Well, because it's the people. It's never just about the platforms, although I don't like a lot of the changes that have been happening because of capitalism or whatever. But it's really the people. And it gets to a point where, again, I exist outside of this. I have a whole life, a whole world that is not played out online. And I'm just kind of like, can we just get back to that? Can we just get back to what we were doing before, all of this? Because what have we been able to get done with social media that we couldn't do outside of it? And how do we think about that? What happens if social media disappears tomorrow? What happens to all the organizing then? So I'm kind of in that space of we got to figure something else out because this is not guaranteed.
Totally. I mean, and you have a huge following. I mean, I don't even want to ask questions around how you must be like on your phone being like, all right, now I'm going to press tweet.
So,
Like,
it's so funny because yes, that happens a lot. I don't tweet nearly as much as I once did. I realize that social media, they don't allow you to make mistakes. They don't allow you to mess up. So especially when you are somebody who's in the public eye like I am, you're not allowed to be human anymore. And that's part of why I've lost my taste for it, because I don't feel like we're allowed to be human beings in a public sphere. And that can make you really paranoid. It can make you really nervous. And it really changes how you engage people. And it's not authentic to me anymore. And so if I'm sitting here in a group chat with my friends and we're talking about things and I'm like, damn, I couldn't tweet this. That's how I know that it's just not what it used to be or what I think it still could be. So I just avoid it. And I'll say whatever every now and then, but I tend to stay away from it these days.
yeah. And I mean, I feel like from the outside world, when you see someone that has a million Twitter followers, 3 million on Instagram, 5 million on TikTok, we hear all these people all the time. People, I think, immediately look at those people and say, oh, wow, they're powerful. They have power. And I think you're more influential than I think power, because unfortunately, and we're going to talk about the haters there, but like they strip you of that, at least from the outside. I mean, I think you still have your internal power, but the power of your words is all based on perception. But I think that one thing that can't be taken from you in the social space is your influence, whether it's positive or negative. You are influencing the way people think, even if they don't agree with you. You're influencing them to write something terrible back to you.
Yeah. No, the influential part is definitely there. Yeah, I would never say that this is powerful. I mean, Drew, I'm a Black queer woman. Like, there's no power there in this society that we're in. There's no true power there. But you definitely can be influential, and you can definitely say things that spark conversations or debates, or you can get people interested in things that they weren't thinking about because you have whatever clout, right? Or what they call clout, or just the sheer numbers of it. I can write something that somebody else could have written 2 weeks ago, but I never saw it. Nobody else ever saw it because they don't have any followers that are sharing it. I write something similar. Everybody shares my thing. And then boom, it's like, oh, there it is, and it's not like I'm the only person thinking about this. I just happen to have the influence to get the word spread out and get more people to talk about it.
Totally. One of the speakers I represent, but someone I also had on the podcast, Tara Schuster's her name. She wrote a book in 2020 called Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies. And it's all about her self-care story and really regaining her self-care and love for herself, kind of for the first time in her life. And one of her chapters, she talks about how we can identify our frenemy within, or like our inner critic, and pretty much kick them to the curb and replace them with positivity and confidence, and basically building out who you really are supposed to be. Can you tell us a little bit, if you have one, like who's your frenemy within, and what do you say to that feminista? Like, what do you say to that version of yourself that's internal and makes you second guess things? And then how do you silence that noise, like in your world?
That's a great question. I wish I had one of those, because maybe I'd save my ass some trouble. I think that's part of the problem, because I don't have that inner voice saying, shut up, don't do it.
That's so funny.
You know what, Drew? I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I don't have that in me. I don't know whether it was how I was raised or just being able to rely on everything I've overcome. I'm one of those people, I firmly believe I can do whatever the hell it is I want to do in my life and just do it.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that, like I said, the only thing that gives me pause on certain things is, do I want to deal with people on Twitter being stupid today? No. Okay, don't tweet that. That's pretty much it. But there's not that part of me that's like, wow, I wonder if you can do this, or you're not. No. and part of it, I always tell people, I was like, well, I am an Aries and I do have that fire. And I was raised as an only child. Like, my father has 2 sons, but I'm not really close to them, whatever. But I was primarily raised as an only child. There's something fiercely independent about that. It's very, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can figure it out. And then I think about situations like, not living at home since I was like 14, whatever, those kinds of things. I grew up fast and I've always kind of been in these situations where I'm like, no, I can do it. I can do it. It's fine. I can do it. I also have worked over time to kind of really get good at a lot of things because I don't like taking risks. I don't like trying something that I might not be good at. And I know that sucks, but also if I'm doing stuff, it's generally because I want to and I like it. And I'm the kind of person that's like, well, let me research, let me learn, let me practice, let me get better at these things so that when I can do them well and I can enjoy what I'm doing. I don't have that thing in me that has me second guessing myself. Honestly, I am extremely confident in all of my skills. True, I am. And a lot of people, they're like, how? Because I'm not supposed to be, right? I'm not. I'm Black. I'm a woman. I'm fat. I'm old. I'm all these things. I'm not supposed to be this confident in myself, but I am. And there's nothing that people can tell me about what I'm capable of. Definitely not an inner voice saying that I'm not good enough. Absolutely not.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, where I'm at now in my life, I'm able to kind of say the same thing. At this point, I mean, I truly feel that same way, especially in work. I mean, like personal life, you tap dance around some things here and there, or just, as you said, like, do I really want to deal with that today?
Mhm.
And you just make a choice. But again, that's power because you're making that choice to say, nah, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, I don't want to drain myself dealing with stuff that is of no consequence. It's like, I don't care about this. This is not important to me. For things that are important to me, I have the skills to work through them. I'm good conversationalist. If I'm having a conflict with a friend or a partner or even my child, I know how to talk through these things. I have the skills to do that. If there's any kinds of tensions in my life, I know how to work through and soothe them. And I'm really comfortable and confident in that. But if somebody's asking me to go give a speech, if somebody right now would be like, we need you to give a 45-minute speech in an hour on this particular topic, I'm going to give them 55 minutes and it's going to be brilliant off the dome. And I'm confident in that. If somebody hits me right now, sends me an email, we need you to write 1,500 words tomorrow about this thing that happened in the news, I'll have it to them by midnight. That's just how I feel about myself and my confidence level. It took a lot to get there, right? It took the experiences that I've had. It took making mistakes and falling and getting back up over and over and over to get to that point where I'm like, I'm tired of falling. I need to make sure that I don't fall anymore. I feel like I've achieved that place.
I love that. Whenever that light bulb goes off, that I'm tired of this. I think it happens to anyone that's trying to get through that one thing that allows you to free yourself to be who you are, do the things you want to do them at the level that you're capable of doing them at, doing the integrity and with the purpose. Want to do them for, I think naturally you start to just drop the things that held you back because
Absolutely.
one thing that was really the roadblock. But sometimes it's not always that easy to say, like, I'm going to keep going. And I think you've seen this on social media, and David Hogg, who I'm really close with, has said some of the same things around his Twitter. Something about David that I find fascinating is that, like, one of the first public things he did was the speech at the March for Our Lives. In his second line, he talks about how he doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. Gun violence is not a political issue. And like, that was his whole premise of his speech. And this is what, 3 months after the shooting in Parkland. And yet still 4.5 years later, the narrative that everyone tells is that he's taking your guns, he's not pro 2A, and that he wants to just literally bring this democratic view around guns to the forefront and make you accept it. And it's just not true. So the haters are going to always be there. How do you, I mean, especially in the work you do, you can't just say, I'm not going to tweet today, because the world might say, Feminista, you need to tweet today.
Yes.
You need to say this to the world because
your agents may tell you that you need to have a talk.
However, but it's true. I mean, there are agents, advisors, it might just be that thing where, your son comes home from school and says, Mom, like, we talked about this in school today and it made me feel this way, or, it did this, or you may be talking to a friend and their child came home and said, we were talking about this in school. And it's like, if you know that your audience is going to potentially learn something or be able to move this conversation forward, whether you know that 10% of your audience may rip you to shreds for it, how do you determine what's a boundary that you need to have for yourself, but then also Like, at what point do you make the decision, you know what? I got to do the thing for the bigger picture now. I got to tweet.
I gotta do this. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate Twitter's filters. They've gotten a lot better with filters. I honestly do not see not even a tenth of my responses or mentions. I don't see them. I exist in a very nice space where I don't see people responding to me. Well, maybe like quote tweet or whatever, but direct responses, I've long had so many things filtered. There's certain words that people use. I filter all those things. There's just so much. I just don't even see it. And so that's one way of being able to put something out there and kind of just let it be. Also, the functions like mute this conversation or blocking people and all those kinds of things have been really helpful because, yes, there are some things I still need to get out there or to put out there because I am an educator. That's what I do. And the program that I'm in now, getting my PhD, it's like, we are here for liberation. We're not here just for knowledge sake, just to say I have a PhD. We are here because we want to change the world. So I'm still an educator. So if I have this platform, how am I not taking what I know or what I've learned and sharing it with people I know will never have the same kind of access to things that I have? So I set up boundaries. I do more on my Patreon, for example, which is you have to subscribe to get that stuff. And I'm kind of like, if you want access to it, you'll pay for it or whatever. But it's a closed kind of community where people are reading and they're absorbing and they're getting stuff and they're not attacking me. If they disagree, they know how to have disagreements in the comment sections that are civil and civil discourse. It's not like people on Twitter, and there's a lot of bots on Twitter that automatically get triggered every time I post something. And those kinds of things are set up. And that's the other part that I don't like about it. It's not authentic because it's not always real human beings behind these things. These things are programmed and set up. And I tell people all the time, stop arguing with these bots. They're not real people. These are canned responses. So it's things like that. And so I set up those boundaries. I only follow, I don't even think, do I even follow 150 people? I don't think I do. So I don't follow a lot of people. I've muted all the news accounts. So like if somebody is retweeting something from CNN, I won't see it unless I go and click and dig because I don't want the constant streaming of news and just the bad news all the time. I'm avoiding that. If I want to do that, I wake up in the morning, I read newspapers, but I don't need to be on Twitter all day seeing the same things, especially when people tweet like videos of police brutality or things like that. I don't need to keep seeing that. So those are some of the boundaries that I create for myself. I'll turn comments off. I won't let people reply. On Instagram, I'll post some things and I'll turn the comments off. I don't want you commenting on this. People get upset. They absolutely get upset, like livid, when they see people tweeting or posting on Instagram and there's no comment section or they're not allowed to reply. I mean, they really feel entitled to be able to engage you. And I'm like, no, actually, you can't talk to me. I'm not letting you talk to me. So that's always fascinating. Then people will just send me private messages like, it's okay. Like, oh, okay, thanks. Turn off the comments. You want to send me a private message. It's those kinds of things. I don't know if I have haters so much as I have people that hate what I'm about. People can't hate you when they don't know you. People can't hate you without having some real connection to you to be able to form such an intense feeling about you. What they don't like, I'm going to be really honest about this. That stuff that we just talked about, the confidence and all of that, and how I think I'm great at everything, they don't like that. They don't like that. I'm not supposed to feel that way about myself, given these cross sections of my identity. So people don't like that. They take it as an affront. I do say what I want to say. People don't like that, mainly because they don't feel like they can do that in their own lives. And so there's a lot of envy there. They envy the fact that I can say whatever I want or that I speak up on these things. A lot of things they can't do. People don't like feminism. They don't like hearing about Black liberation. They don't like hearing about queer people. They don't like those things. I have no problem talking about all these things whenever I want. I'm atheist. People absolutely do not want to hear about atheism. They want you to be quiet. You're not supposed to say anything bad about their God or anything like that. And I'm just like, I can say what I want. So it's not necessarily me. It's the things that I'm about or the things that I represent that they don't like. And just because I'm this bold, influential, loud, very much in your face kind of person, they make it about not liking me.
Totally. And those are things that'll never change. It doesn't matter how much they try to marginalize you.
Absolutely not. Like when I was a kid, they were saying I was too opinionated and that I had no self-control and I talked too much. And they're like, well, what do you do for a living now? I talk. I give my opinion and I get paid for it.
It's so funny you say that. I was talking to my dad last weekend and we're all friends here. And I made it very clear that I'm going to talk about my truth and my reality. My dad, he's so proud of me over my sobriety and just career and a lot of the things that I'm very grateful that I have that support. But I know just our communication styles are different. Like I am his gay, loud son, and he is that quiet, introverted, straight man. We're not going to vibe on the fact that I'm dramatic. I'm always dramatic. It doesn't matter. I'm sure even when I couldn't speak, I was dramatic. Like I was probably being dramatic about how I could.
Body language was dramatic.
Yeah. Everything was dramatic. And those are things that won't change. Now, I think that the people in a similar sense, but obviously different, it's kind of like, my dad's just an example, but there's others I still think that look at me and they're like, oh, no, but you can't act like that. It's like, who the hell are you to tell me that I can't be that? Yeah. It's not harming you. And also it's who I am. Fight the battles that you should fight. Give me the critiques that you should give me, which are what? You're not treating your body the way you should. You're not getting the help that you need. Those are all really important things that were said to me a number of times that I didn't listen to, eventually did. But the ones around who I am and what I stand for and just who my person is, like at the core of who I am, when you remove the stuff that should be removed, it's like, that's not going to change. I want to ask a question about your most recent book. One thing that really stuck out to me when I did read it, which I'm lying when I say that when I listened to it, because I don't like to read. I
consumed it.
Yes, I consumed it. One area that really stuck out to me was this idea about how long it took for you to bring everything of who you are to the work that you do, which was fascinating to me because it seems to me that, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but how could you have done the work that you do without bringing everything to the table of who you are? Because I believe like that's the richness of the work you do, is that you are not just talking about the problems that your expertise and the words that you share to big audiences. You're not just talking about that when you're giving your keynote or when you're recording a podcast or when you're writing an article. You live that 365 days a year, 24/7. So I know nothing about how it feels, of course, in any way, shape, or form to be a Black woman, but I do know how it feels to be an alcoholic and an addict. And when I started to share my story, I felt as if, especially in the workplace and with people that I normally wasn't sharing that story with people that I was withholding some of my, the world calls them scars, but I definitely call them treasures at this point in my life. I was hiding that stuff. But when I started to be really true and authentic and bring who I was to my work, that's when my success really started to follow. And that's when the profit started to follow. When I started to live that way, I just realized after, oh gosh, what have I been doing for so many years, trying to run away from this person that I still would say I want to change who that person is. But to hide that person from the world, it's kind of like a catch-22 of saying, well, how do you think you're going to change who you are if you're not living and being present in each moment of who you actually are? I mean, how important it is to you now, and I guess people in general, to share their stories, especially when they're intersectional. And how does that then bring power to them in the work they're doing?
I think that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools that we have just culturally in our society, because that's how we learn about each other. And it's when we learn about each other, is how we build community. And that's how we become stronger as people. And not everybody is in the space to tell their story or to tell a good story or to tell a story that's going to resonate, things like that. Part of that is because of the fear of the response, the fear of the backlash. Like, how are people going to treat me when they've learned this thing about me? And I definitely think earlier on in my life, when I felt like I was alone, and a lot of times I was not as willing to open up about everything because I didn't want to be judged or ostracized when I was still seeking community. But I think that once I became comfortable having built community and feeling supported by the people around me, I became more comfortable opening up about things that I hadn't necessarily shared with folks in the past. Like there's people I went to college with and they have no idea that I was homeless. I have been friends with since high school. I had no idea that I've been through those things. And it wasn't until like in my 30s that I started actually sharing that part of me because I felt like it was relevant to what I was doing. That's the other part. It's like, I'm not telling you anything that's not relevant to the conversation we're having. I don't necessarily volunteer a whole lot of information. But as someone who is a public speaker and who is giving keynotes, who is doing trainings and facilitating all those kinds of things, that is part of my work. So I found that I get people to trust me more. They trust my expertise. They trust what I'm saying when I open up and share those things. And it's a way of connecting. And so I had to just really learn to lean into the truths about who I am and all these experiences that I've had and things that I continue to experience as a result of my intersecting identities, but just also as a result of being a human being. I realized that the more I share those things, the more I'm able to connect with different people. And that's what's important. I mean, that's the utmost importance in the work that I do, whether as a writer or as a speaker. You have to be able to connect with your audience. And people don't want the fake stuff. They don't want the fluff. People can tell when you're using a filter. People can tell straight up, like you're not being 100% honest, and they'll call you out on it. And so many, many years ago, I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to tell my story. And whichever part of the story I need to tell for this particular thing, I will share that and I will open up. And I've always had people every single time, at least one person comes and says, I had that same experience. So yeah, it's better to share and to be open with that because that's how you connect and that's how you change lives, by connecting with people.
Totally. I mean, it's why I feel inclined to even be having this podcast is because of the community. When I started to share my story, that just came to me. I mean, I all coming to me just privately, publicly, and it wasn't praise in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I guess it was, but I didn't take it as that. In my opinion, it was them saying, thank you for sharing that because I needed to hear it for this reason. And it was interesting to me because the old Drew, the addict, the alcoholic, the really, really kind but troubled 31-year-old before I stopped and got help would live for that praise and would kind of not see what the other person and why they were talking to me. And it's just interesting how it works because now I don't even notice the praise. And all I focus on is that they are connecting with me. When you are authentic and honest with yourself, that comes naturally. And I think that, again, that's why we do what we do, is to be that voice for other people and to be able to help them through the tough times that they're doing. A couple more questions, and I want to center them on you in the sense of less about what you do for others, but more what you do for yourself. I mean, I think this work can be so rewarding, but it can also be so challenging. And especially if you want to do it well, you have to worry about like, how are you? So what do you do to stay healthy yourself? Like, what's your self-care? What do you do to give yourself that same love, kindness, and support that you give so freely to others?
And that's been the focus of everything that I've been doing for the last 3 years since I turned 40, is focusing on taking care of myself, particularly having retired from social work and having left because I wasn't taking care of myself. I just became really committed to that. And one of those things is rest. You know, something as simple as taking a nap every day is super, super important. And I couldn't do that before because I had to be in an office somewhere. So, you know, something as simple as that. I travel a lot these days. I leave the country at least like 5 times a year just to get away and breathe different air. I garden. I'm big, big, big on gardening. I love my house plants. I love my vegetables in my garden, flowers outside, trees, all that stuff. I do all of that. I live at Home Depot. My hands are always dirty, right? I love my cats. I have 4 cats. I spend a lot of time with them. They're wonderful. I have love in my life, my friends, my partner, my son. I connect with people. I spend time with people. I like hosting events where I can bring people together, dinner parties and things like that, traveling to concerts. And I love that. Those are the kinds of things that I do. And I just became really committed to being intentional about those things. You know, I'm like, oh, I haven't been to a concert in months. That's ridiculous for me. Like pre-COVID, I try to go every week to some kind of show somewhere. So, you know, getting back into those things and prioritizing those things. I started my PhD program after I was 40 because I love to learn. And I love to be in school, actually. So thinking intentionally about things that I just love to do and just doing them. And now that I have the time, right, I have a lot more time and availability to be able to do those kinds of things because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. My mom passed away from pancreatic cancer when she was 51. And the closer I get to that age, the more I'm like, we are not promised tomorrow. Live everything now. So now I like going ziplining and doing, fun stuff like that. So that's what I do for myself. And I am in a very, very good place. I work out now, all that good stuff. I'm in a very good place.
I love that. I mean, first off, like so many similarities, things I do, which is freaking send you a picture of our patio because I have about 50 plants on it.
Yes.
It is therapeutic. It is something that just makes me excited and happy. It's nice to watch something else grow.
Yes. Watching things grow. Yeah.
Because I feel like I watch people grow all the time. And I'm like, yes, nice and super transformative. But at the same time, it's really nice to watch someone that can't talk grow too. To appreciate the beauty that comes with not just hearing someone say something, right?
Watching a zucchini grow from a little seed. It's great. It's just, I love that. I'm like, I did that. That's wonderful. I worked with nature. We did this thing. It's great. Great collab.
I love that. I totally do. Well, the way I finish off is a takeaway 10. And it's basically 10 questions. They're super simple.
Okay.
And have fun with it. But at the same time, I just want you to be yourself. So what always makes you laugh?
Cat memes. Just little videos of cats and little memes and stuff with them and them being cute and funny and doing funny things. Always. I laugh hysterically. I spent a lot of time watching cat videos.
If you could ask one person one question, who would it be and what would you ask?
If I'm thinking lately, probably be like W.E.B. Du Bois. I probably ask him like what made him change his mind.
I love that. It's a loaded question because you're like, do I think there's someone that's here? Do I think there's someone I've lost? Do I think there's someone that's not here that I don't know, but I want to ask a question to? I mean, there's so many angles to go with it.
Because as I study and read and things like that, the questions just come like, I would love to sit and ask you more about this thing. So I can't because you're dead. So all I have is what you've written.
Totally. What advice do you have for young people that are entering the workplace? I say that because I just know that it is such a tough time right now to be young and going into the workplace more than ever.
Yeah, I would say to them, you all are actually in a better place than we were. Like your parents are more accepting of you being at home. Take advantage of those things. Build your community, stay with your family as long as possible. Figure out what it is that you want to do and what your dreams and your goals are. Don't let yourself slide into work that is draining and that you don't really like or whatever. I know it's hard to think about that, but if you have the option to lighten your financial burdens by maybe staying with friends or family, do so while you figure out and work towards being able to do what you love. Because there's no use in working yourself to death for something that doesn't have any meaning for you.
Love that. How should we measure our lives? In years and moments and accomplishments? Something else?
Experiences, definitely. What have you gained from your experiences? What have you learned? How have you grown from them? Look at each experience, major experience that you've had that's had an impact on your life and kind of look back and see, how did this change your life? How did it change you? How does it contribute to who you are right now? If you could go back and do things differently, would you? And those kinds of things are definitely major experiences.
I love that. Name one thing about yourself that you will never change. I guess we already said one, you're loud, but other than that.
I'll never change my integrity. That's another reason why a lot of people don't like me, is because I have integrity and I'll go against the crowd that people expect that I'm supposed to go with if I feel like going with them compromises what I'm about. So my integrity.
If you could, would you really want to live a life that is free from challenges and obstacles?
Yes. I've been through enough. No, from now on, if I could avoid obstacles and challenges, please, after 43 years of challenges, please, I will take it.
Which 3 people, past or present, would you invite to a dinner party?
Prince, Malcolm X, and probably my mom.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I miss my mom.
It's amazing. How do you define a community and are you a part of one?
I think community is where people exist in the same spaces and have shared interests and common goals and beliefs and values. I do. I think I have a great community, a nuclear community, a very micro community, but I think I'm also part of larger communities in which I'm in solidarity with people. When I say something about being in community with somebody, it's like we can relate to and we've had similar experiences and we have similar understandings and values about things. So yes, I think my smaller community is super, super strong and I wouldn't trade those fools for anything.
I love that. Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized the person staring back?
Yes. And quite literally, actually, I had weight loss surgery about 11 years ago. And I remember there being that moment where I looked in the mirror and I didn't know who I was looking at. And I realized that I had body dysmorphia, which I still struggle with a little bit. I don't see myself the same way that other people do, which is a consequence of rapid weight loss sometimes. So yeah, I literally have looked in the mirror and been like, whew, very caught off guard by not recognizing the person that I saw.
And my last question, what are you grateful for in this moment?
I'm grateful for my kid. I miss my kid. My kid's been gone all summer. He's going to be 16 in October. And just seeing who the young man that he is and who he's becoming, I'm so grateful that he exists as a human being and that I get to share in helping him grow.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so sweet. What a nice way to end the conversation. Well, I'm grateful for you and I'm grateful for this time that we shared. And I really hope that we can always do this work together because I love what I do. I love the work that I'm privileged to do, and being able to share space with people like you and be a small part of your journey, knowing how big of a part people like you are to mine. And it just makes me so grateful for what I have. I appreciate this time. I appreciate all the time we get to spend together.
I do too, Drew. You're awesome. And you're definitely somebody that I know when I look over the trajectory of my life, you definitely have played a significant role in changing things for me. So I definitely appreciate you as well.
Well, thank you, my friend.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Small Steps, Big Change podcast. I hope that this episode inspired you to let go of whatever is holding you back and take the first small step. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, follow our YouTube channel, the Small Steps, Big Change podcast, and connect with me on Instagram. Remember, no matter what you are going through, without taking small steps, you are limiting your potential to create big change. So take that first small step today. I promise you that you won't regret it.